Welcome back guys, Ricky here and welcome to our third editing class. Now in the previous class I gave you some tips on how to capture awesome portraits, but as I've mentioned before, editing a photo is what finalizes it. So let's get into Lightroom and go over some quick things that we should all do and not do when it comes to portraits. So here I have a photo of my brother. Now the very first thing that I suggest you guys do is you want to make sure that the photo you're about to edit is actually in focus, because it happens to everyone where sometimes it seems like it's in focus, but the tip of the nose is what's actually in focus. And you always want to have the eyes be in focus, because it's very weird to like look at a portrait and their eyes are just like kind of blurry, right? Yeah, just zoom in, make sure that it's pretty much in focus, and then you can move forward. Now the main thing is skin tone. So let's start off with temperature. And again, this one's already edited, so we're just gonna look over the settings that I chose, right? So temperature, look, I'm gonna increase it, and you don't want that, right? You want the proper skin tone. So usually, if you have auto white balance on your camera or your phone camera, it'll do the proper white balance. And if not, and you see something white in the image, like a true white, which here we don't have, but if you do have a photo that has it, you can click on the white part of the photo. It's not gonna let me in this one because it's just the sky. You can click on it and it usually adjusts it, or we can even put auto, but you see that's too warm for me. So it was daylight outside, but I feel like that's still a little bit too warm, so I'm gonna bring it back down to 5,000. You could see that if you make it too cold or too warm, it's just not, it's gonna look off, right? So just play around with the temperature and the tint. Now you also want to make sure that the saturation, it's the same deal pretty much. Right now it's at 3. You don't want it to be too saturated because then you start to look like an Oompa Loompa or something, right? So then I had it at -13. And then the vibrance, it's similar. You're just messing around with like the punchiness of the colors. Speaking of punchiness, let's go to the HSL, or the hue, saturation, luminance tab. So the red, orange, and yellow, those are usually the skin tone colors, right? Because our lips are usually pink, you know, reddish, and then our skin is usually orange and yellow. So again, Oompa Loompa, you don't want that. Are they even orange? I think. I haven't seen that movie in a while, but yeah, here I put -20. The yellow as well, I just put it at -20. Now the blue, again, I don't really like the blue too much, so I'm just gonna bring it down to like -30. And then yeah, here in the saturation, again, you can further manipulate the colors to make sure the skin tone is a proper skin tone and it kind of matches the person. Now next, you want to make sure that the exposure is correct. Now I did have to compensate a lot for this one, and I brought down the highlights all the way down. Don't be afraid to just crank it all the way down or the shadows all the way up. I mean, I'm more iffy about the shadows, but there's been quite a lot of times where the highlights, I just have to bring them all the way down. You want to make sure that the face is fairly bright. Now you can use the radial filter. Now in a previous editing video, I called it the ellipse tool, which, I mean, kind of the same, I guess, the shape. But yeah, grab the radial filter, and here you can just click invert. Now obviously that's way too harsh, right? But you can slowly like put 0.1, 0.2, 0.3. Now you don't want the parts of the face to be blown out, aka the highlights are way too bright. So this is just as an example, but again, you can do this and make sure that the feather is pretty high. I'm gonna bring it down to like 0.1, just right there. But yeah, you can do that to just kind of like brighten the face and just kind of make the focus of the image be the face, because it's a portrait. Now, speaking of focus, what I like to do as well, which you can do with the radial filter, but I'm gonna do it with the vignette, which is under the effects tab. So I'm gonna turn it off and on. So you can use the vignette to darken the outskirts of the image so that, again, the focus is the person's face. So for this one, I made it -13. I increased the feather. So pretty much, look, this is 0 feather. Obviously you don't want that. So I put the feather at 100 just so it's as smooth as possible. And then the midpoint. So that, look, I'm gonna bring down the feather. Look at the midpoint. So that is making it more in the center versus the very corners. So I brought the midpoint all the way as close as possible, the vignette as much as possible. And again, this is off. this is on. So that paired up with the radial filter making his face brighter, and yeah, properly exposing the photo, it can really transform it and really make the person stand out. And now let's talk about the spot removal tool, because everyone has blemishes or pimples sometimes, you know, it happens, right? Even though I do encourage you guys to not overly edit out every single wrinkle you have, because it's just natural that as we get older, we're gonna have wrinkles and we can't just always keep getting rid of them. But that's the end of my rant. Like here, let's move on to the photo. Like my brother has a couple specks there that we can totally get rid of. So I'm gonna click heal, the opacity 100. And yeah, let's just do that. I'm gonna get rid of that. With H, you make the dots go away. So there, look, we just got rid of that. He has something here, maybe here. So we can just go throughout the image and see if there's a couple things that we can just take off. But yeah, I'm gonna turn it off. He has a couple things, turn it on. I guess another thing that you can do is if the under eye is a bit too dark and you just want to lighten it up a little bit or just like fix it a little bit, you can put heal, you can put 38 opacity, and yeah, look, just like a little bit, just do it a little bit. But again, you don't want to overdo it, but just clean it up, little blemishes, little pimples here and there if you want. Now let's talk about a technique that's very old, and it's called dodging and burning. Dodge is when you make it brighter, a certain part of an image, and burning is when you make it darker. All right, so let me zoom in and grab the brush. Yeah, 0.2, yeah, that's fine, because we're gonna dodge first, so we're gonna make it brighter. And the size, you can always play around with it, but 4.3 is fine. And you just paint over the areas that you want to be brighter. So usually like the corners of the mouth, you want it to be a little bit brighter under the eye and around the eye. You can just make it brighter. That's already pretty bright. We can make this a little bigger. And yeah, I guess like right here. And then we can switch, create a new one, and do the opposite. So negative 0.2. Like the eyebrows, we can make them a bit darker, even though his are really dark already. The mustache, we can, I'm not gonna make it darker, but yeah, like I guess here, just to like make it more pronounced, his like cheeks, I guess. What else? I mean, there's not too much else, right? And then as a final thing that I want to touch on is you can also use the brush to brighten up the eyes and make the eyes a bit wider, not wider, whiter. So I'm gonna put this at 0.4. I'm gonna make this smaller, and I'm just gonna draw over the eyes. This is like sometimes not even noticeable, but I mean, if you really want to go all the way, this eye is a bit better because there's more light hitting this eye. So you're going to be able to tell a bit more details of his, what is it, his retina and his iris. This side is a bit darker, but for the eye, you can actually increase the sharpness a little bit, the clarity. Just make it like 25. Now, for the eyes, you can increase that, right? Make them a bit brighter and increase the clarity and stuff. But if we go to the basics tab, you do not want to increase the clarity because I'm going to zoom out and like it just, you do not want a lot of clarity on a portrait. Maybe sharpness. So if you go to detail, I did add like 48 to the sharpness, right? But yeah, clarity, texture, like no, like you don't want that. But that's it. Look, let me turn off the dodging and burning. So it's very subtle, but again, compiling all of the things that I've talked about makes the image just kind of like reach the next level, I guess. It just makes for a very nice edit. So yeah, that's it, guys. So the assignment for this video is simple. Just grab a portrait photo and practice editing and finalizing it. But that is it for this one, guys. The next class is the very last one where we're gonna go out to take some photos and just practice some of the things that we've learned throughout these videos. So you definitely cannot miss it. And yeah, I'll see you guys in that one.